Paul Jandreau, 50, met Lateisha Maria Askew, 38, in a kickboxing class in 2002. She was a bodybuilder and in incredible shape, and the first time they sparred, his friend said that she put a whoopin on him. A friend of Paul's said that Lateisha was the type of woman that would turn most guys' heads. Soon after they met in kickboxing class, they were working out together, and one day, as he was holding her ankles and she was doing sit-ups, he said that he saw her six-pack and he knew that he was going to have her one day. Within weeks, they were dating. Within months, she moved in, and within a year, on June the 28th in 2003, they were married. This was her third marriage and his second, and he had 2 adult daughters. To Paul's friends, Lateisha seemed like an odd match because she was introverted, and Paul was outgoing and very friendly. And she was quiet and a little bit standoffish, which they didn't care for. In 2006, they went through a very bad time. They were expecting twins after struggling with infertility, but unfortunately, she went into labor prematurely, and the babies didn't make it. One of the babies was stillborn, and the other lived for about 22 seconds. Lateisha was understandably devastated, so they sought counseling, and she tried to distract herself by doubling her workouts. She also competed in female bodybuilding competitions, and she won the National American Sports Federation North Carolina Bodybuilding Championship. Paul was very proud of her, and he had pictures of her on his desk from her competitions, and he also added a gym to their home, and he helped to train her. But 2 years after they lost the twins, she was now standoffish with him. And she said that Paul decided that they would live together but lead separate lives, with Paul being upstairs and she would sleep downstairs. And after that, they would only communicate via text and they rarely saw each other. She told people that Paul was always angry with her, and in early June of 2010, he told her that he wanted her out of the house by the end of the month. She told Paul she wasn't leaving, so things just got worse after that. She said that Paul would kick her door early every morning, telling her that he wanted her out, and the situation escalated when he accused her of keying his car. After she spoke with an officer regarding that situation, she claimed that Paul came in the house, poked her head with his index finger, and he told her that he wanted to put a through her thick skull, and that night she went to get a gun from a toolbox in the garage. When she went to the toolbox, the gun wasn't there, so she drove to a friend's house and she took his handgun without his knowledge, and then she kept it with her at all times. Also, Paul told a co-worker that one night he woke up and Lateisha was crawling around his room in the middle of the night, and because of that, he slept with his door locked. That would have freaked me out so bad. That is creepy. On June the 30th, in 2010, his co-worker Dennis Carter was expecting Paul to be in his driveway like he had been every morning for 2 years. They rode to work together. When he realized that Paul wasn't there, he tried calling, but Paul wasn't answering his company phone nor his personal phone. They had both been turned off, so he tried Paul's house phone. It was off the hook. So he ended up driving himself to work, where he told his co-workers that he was worried about Paul. Paul was someone that was very prompt, and he was very dependable. So much so that if he was 5 minutes early, he was considered late. Paul retired from the Navy after 31 years, and he was a Command Master Chief Petty Officer, and he moved to Moyock, North Carolina. And he worked at BAE Systems, which is a Norfolk, Virginia defense contractor. Because Paul never missed a day of work, and he never called out sick, his co-workers were really worried, so they called police. And at around 7:44 that morning, a deputy came to Paul's house at 100 Armstead Court, Moyock, North Carolina, to perform a welfare check. At the house, Deputy Lisa Starcher found Paul's truck in the driveway, so she knocked on the doors and the windows, but there was no answer. She then called one of Paul's co-workers and asked if he had a family member that they could contact. The co-worker said that he had a wife that worked at Blackwater Security and her name was Lateisha. So they notified her and she came home and spoke with the deputy. She said that she hadn't seen Paul and that she really didn't know where he was. She then let the deputy take a look around the house, but Paul wasn't there and there weren't any signs of foul play. So when Deputy Starcher returned to the house later that afternoon, Paul's truck was still in the driveway, but no one answered the door when she knocked. The windows were now covered so that you couldn't see inside. That alone is really weird, and it made Lateisha look even more suspicious, in my opinion. The next day, when the police went to check on the house, Paul's truck was now backed up to the front door, and Lateisha and her brother Eugene were loading furniture. She was now avoiding eye contact, and she kept rubbing her head and her neck. She was up to something, and she was now agitated that they were even there and that she kept being questioned about Paul. And she told the deputy that Paul had probably just left with his girlfriend and that they were living separate lives. Once Paul's friends learned that the truck was backed up to the house, some of them left to work early so they could keep an eye on the house once the police left, and the neighborhood was now also watching the house. A little more than 24 hours after Paul went missing, his friends tried calling his phone again. This time someone answered, but it wasn't Paul. It was a construction worker that saw his phone on the ground near a construction site in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Paul's friend told the construction worker about the situation, so he notified police so they could come and recover the phone. And investigators believed that the phone was put there on purpose. Someone wanted it to be found in that exact location. On July 2nd, 72 hours after Paul's disappearance, detectives set up a time to talk with Lateisha, but when they arrived, she wasn't there. Instead, there was a note near the door, and it said that she had walked to River's Edge, which is a neighborhood close by. And as they were looking for her, she was on the phone with 911, wondering why officers were at her house and that she was 20 miles away in Chesapeake, Virginia. She told them that she wasn't coming home until the next day. That doesn't make sense to me because she had a scheduled time to meet with them, so why was she surprised that they were at her house? Plus, if she was really in Chesapeake, Virginia, how would she know that they were at her house? When asked why she left, she said she didn't feel like talking about Paul's disappearance and she needed to clear her head. She wouldn't tell the dispatcher exactly where she was, but they were able to track her location anyway, and the call was coming from inside the house. At this point, they knew that there had to be something in that house that she did not want them to find, so deputies cordoned off the house to keep Lateisha inside until they could get a warrant. When they returned at 3 a.m. with the warrant, they knocked but no one answered the door. They then forced their way in and they entered through the garage where they immediately noticed a big pile of trash in the middle of the floor. They searched the house and they found Lateisha hiding in the walk-in closet that was off of the master bedroom, and she had blankets and clothes on top of her. When she was removed from the closet, she hid her face and she was holding her head down, and as the house was being searched, she was read her rights and she was interviewed. When asked why she didn't answer the door, she told them that she thought someone was trying to break in the house, even though the police announced their presence as they knocked on the door, and they also had their blue lights flashing. She keeps making herself look more and more guilty. When she was asked where Paul was, she denied knowing anything, just like before. But it really didn't matter anymore because her life was about to change. They found a 50-gallon tote hidden underneath the trash they saw earlier in the garage. And as they opened it, they recognized the unmistakable odor of decomposition, and inside was something wrapped in layers of plastic and duct tape. They didn't want to disturb the evidence, so they just cut the top of the plastic enough so that they could see inside, and they saw human hair. A crime scene unit was then called to process the scene, and as Lateisha was being questioned about the finding, her story started to change. She still denied ending Paul's life, but she said that she knew who might have done it. She said that she had asked some guys to beat up Paul because he had hit her, and she later admitted to making that up. He wasn't abusing her. She was just mad because he wanted her out, and she told officers that maybe those men came to their house and attacked Paul. Paul was shot 5 times, and one of the wounds was inflicted from close range. He also had around a dozen lacerations to his head, and when they contacted Paul's family to inform them of his death, they told the investigators that Paul had been preparing to file for a divorce. Paul was very frustrated with their marriage, and after almost 8 years, he had had enough, and neighbors and co-workers knew this as well. His brother Mike said that Paul talked about divorce for weeks. He told Mike that she was cheating on him and that he had plenty of evidence to prove it. He just needed to get her out of the house so that he could get his life back. He told his brother, "You know, there's plenty of fish out there in the sea, and I'll find one that wants me for me." He seemed like such a good guy. Lateisha was arrested the day after Paul was found, and her bond was $1 million. A little while after she was arrested, she told investigators that she wanted to talk. She claimed that she was scared for her safety, so she grabbed the gun that she had stolen and she came around to Paul's room and she began shooting. She claimed that he had tried to get the gun from her and that they wrestled around for the gun. When the shooting stopped, she claimed that she panicked, so for the next 3 days, she attempted to hide any and all of the evidence. No one was buying her pathetic self-defense story, so she was charged with first-degree murder. This is what she said happened the night that Paul died. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, she was awakened when Paul came into her room telling her that he wanted her out of the house. She said he then grabbed her by her feet and he dragged her down the hallway before he let go and then went back to his room. After that, according to her, she went back to bed. Shortly after, Paul came back to her bedroom with a long gun and he told her that she had 5 minutes to get out of the house or he would kill her. And again, he left and went back to his room. She thought that she was going to be hurt, so she jumped up, grabbed the .45 caliber gun that was beside her bed, and ran down the hallway. When she got close to Paul's bedroom door, she saw a shadow and she shot at it. She then walked further into the bedroom and shot in the direction of the shadow. He dropped his gun and then he walked forward and he jumped towards her and he fell on top of her. She said that she continued to shoot and then she crawled out from underneath him. The prosecution argued that Paul's death was anything but self-defense, and they believed that she ambushed him. The prosecution said during their opening statement that Lateisha didn't want to give up the lifestyle that she had because of Paul, and that on the morning of the deadline, as Paul was getting ready for work, she attacked him. She came in his room and she took him by surprise. Shots were fired and there was a struggle over the gun. She shot him several times. She hit him in the head and then she put a plastic bag over his head so that she didn't get any on the floor. She then dragged him out of the room and she started to wrap him up. And after 24 hours, she went to several home improvement stores to purchase a larger plastic tote along with other supplies to hide or cover up any evidence because the tote that she had wasn't large enough. And they also have her on video purchasing that tote. Investigators also learned that Lateisha rented a storage unit the day after Paul disappeared, and they believed she had plans to move the body, but she didn't anticipate how many people would be watching the house. After 90 minutes of deliberation, the verdict was read. Guilty of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, Lateisha's family was very emotional, but she was expressionless. She didn't show any expression or any emotion whatsoever. And she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And she is currently serving her time in the North Carolina Correction Institution in Raleigh, North Carolina.